Number 1.
James David Gilmore answered the door in his Bagwell Park home, said he was going out, and left. The 14-year-old was missing for 36 years, until the workmen visiting the former Gilmore home on Best Avenue discovered the teen's skeleton under the house. He'd been buried face down in a sandy, shallow grave. Gilmore's death remains one of the more bizarre mysteries in the San Gabriel Valley. He went missing January 7, 1962, and his family continued to live in the same house for another 11 years. There's never been a suspect named in the investigation. 2 new detectives have been assigned to the case. Jimmy, as his family called him, wasn't a pleasant person, according to relatives. Family members and neighbors told police he exhausted money from boys and threatened to beat others. His mother, Donna, described him as a vicious. Police said he also had a poor relationship with his 2 brothers. He was a bully, said his younger brother, Gwen Gilmore of San Bernardino. He had a reputation of being crazy. Jimmy also hung out with older teens in a motorcycle gang, where Gilmore said, "As far as I know, Jimmy ran away from home," he said, "until they found his remains. I'd swear he was running the mafia. He was that smart and cruel. He was devious, cruel, and he enjoyed being cruel." On the night of January 7th, 1962, Gwen and Jimmy were home watching a Disney show when there was a knock at the back door. He said, "I'll be out a little bit," and never came back. Gwen Gilmore said Jimmy was reported missing 3 days later, but his final resting place wasn't discovered until March 28, 1985. When the house in the 12,700 block of Best Avenue was being renovated for resale. A workman in the crawl space underneath the house noticed a tennis shoe sticking out of the dirt. He used a stick to push the shoe aside and saw bone. An empty cigarette pack and a lighter also were found under the house, said Sheriff's Homicide Search Paul Mondry. Family members and former players were questioned. Detectives in 1985 conducted lie detector tests on Jimmy's brother, father, and mother. Jimmy's father, also named James, was living with a friend in a trailer in La Puente when his son vanished, Mondry said. He remembers his wife telling him Jimmy disappeared, Mondry said. James said it was his idea to polygraph the kids. He claimed that he was skeptical of the kids' story. It was his belief that Jimmy never left the house. There is nothing to confirm the children were given a polygraph test in 1962, Mondry said. Gwen Gilmore said he was fortunately not nosy enough that night to see who was at the door with Jimmy. If he had, he thinks he might have ended up buried under the house, just like his brother. Over the years, you think about something like that. They didn't want him found and wanted no witnesses, he said. I figured one of his buddies came to get money from him. Jimmy's body was found beneath the bedroom that his brothers said belonged to their parents. Gwen Gilmore, who lived at the other end of the house, said neither he nor his family members smelled anything unusual while they still lived at the house. In 1985, Sheriff Detective Gary Kohler, who was then handling the case, said the sandy grave acted like a kitty litter and the vents at the base of the house at the grave. The neighborhood at that time also had its share of chickens, horses, and other animals whose smell may have helped obscure a stench of decaying flesh. The man who bought the house in 1973 and sold it in 1984 told police he never smelled anything unusual, Monty said. Wayne Gilmore described the house as being long and narrow. At the end of the house was a barn where they kept horses. Everybody lived individually. Our parents would go out and leave us. As far as I could remember, we had no supervision, he said. Wayne Gilmore also said he was his brother's whipping boy. Jimmy hit him a few times, knocked him with a baseball bat, and tried to strangle him. He said his other brother and his sister were there to pull Jimmy off him. Jimmy did it because he enjoyed it, he said. But when Gilmore said he never fought back, he admits he was relieved when his brother disappeared. He said that may sound he has a motive, but he had nothing to do with his brother's disappearance. I've been open and honest. I got nothing to hide. Gwen and another brother, Richard, are the only surviving family members, when Gilmore said. Their sister, Linda, was stabbed to death in 1979 in San Francisco by her boyfriend, he said. Their parents are dead, Wayne Gilmore said. To her dying day, Donna Gilmore asked her younger son if he knew anything. Wayne Gilmore said he doesn't, but he still wants to know who killed his brother Jimmy, just to know. The time for retribution is long past. What good it serve, he said. But did his brother deserve to die? Him dying at that age saved some people's lives, Wayne Gilmore said. He could have killed people as an adult. The police gave lie detector tests to Jimmy's brothers and parents, but all three family members passed. As of late 2015, no one has been arrested for Jimmy's murder, and most of the people connected to the case are no longer alive.
Number 2.
When the body of Michelle von Emster came to the authorities, the doctor who analyzed her saw it very clearly. A shark or a group had skinned her everywhere. However, the more one knew about what happened the night before, the less obvious was the official cause of death. The area of Sunset Cliffs, San Diego, is attached to the Pacific, a coastal area with a surface of sandstone with groups, an area unbreachable by the rough sea that rains and frequent inclement weather. In fact, huge sights often want tourists to watch the stage from behind the railings and chains that are on the promenade. The story began on Friday, April 15, 1994, when two surfers realized something very stranger. A group of seagulls standing in the ocean, maybe half a dozen, pecking at something that floated. When the curiosity took hold of both, the boys approached to see what it was about. Horrified, there was a lifeless boy floating on the surface, that of Michelle von Emster swaying upside down on the waves. Her brown eyes were open, and they seemed to look distractedly at the rocky bottom. She was naked except for 2 rings and a brass bracelet. Seagulls perched her on her back. Her arms floated forward, and what remained of her legs were curled up in the strange form of question mark. One wing of a butterfly tattoo remained on her right shoulder. However, the other was missing, along with a large piece of skin. Even before an autopsy was performed, an unofficial verdict seemed clear. A large white shark had attacked her at midnight. On Saturday afternoon, the coroner confirmed the attack. Local television stations dusted all tapes of white sharks. The San Diego Tribune published a story on how to avoid becoming a bait for sharks. Never swim in areas where sharks are known to be common. They went on to say, "The truth is that the facts mixed perfectly with the images that are familiar to anyone who has seen a legendary film Spielberg. However, everything at first seemed so clear, when it was not. Her body had much more to tell." Her remains were taken to the headquarters of the Coast Guard. After the initial examination, the doctor referred to large pieces of torn meat and a missing right leg. After completing her formal autopsy, the coroner presented the following timeline. Michelle went swimming alone at midnight in the ocean. She was last seen alive at 8 p.m. The girl went into the water sometime around 12 at night. Shortly after she entered the Pacific waters, she was attacked by a great white shark. The violent attack of the shark led Michelle to reach the bottom of the ocean, when she suffered a broken neck and ingested substantial amounts of sand. Hence the official cause of death: blood loss and drowning. In addition, after her death, she was attacked by another group of smaller blue sharks, as explained by Detective Mike Hurley over time. However, after the official note, many began to ask a series of questions that seriously questioned the theory of the shark attack. Von Emster finally drowned after an internal hemorrhage, not blood loss. The girl also had, among other injuries, a broken neck, bruises on her face and arms, broken ribs and bruises, and her pelvis was torn forcibly. None of these injuries are consistent with the attack of sharks. Also, the water temperature was very cold for swimming. As if all of this was strange, Brent Blackburn, the San Diego coroner in the case, had never encountered a shark attack victim. In fact, no one who had seen the body had seen a victim of shark attack before. In her defense, Blackburn contacted experts at the Scripps Institute of Oceanography to learn more about the victims of shark attack, but in reality, they never saw the body. There were so many things in the air with the theory of attack of the sharks that most experts rejected the claim that they had been attacked while alive. Ralph Collier, a shark researcher, did not agree with Blackburn's findings. After seeing the remains of Michelle's leg bone, Collier said the following: "When a white shark bites part of the lamb, the cut is clean, almost like when you put a hand with a saw. What was left of Michelle's femur was anything but a shark attack." It seemed like what happens when you get a piece of bamboo and it is reduced to a point with a knife. I have seen about 100 photos of cases that I have reviewed over the years, and I have never seen any bone that reached this point. On Black Bone's explanation for the amputated leg and the presence of sand on Michelle's body, Collier stated that the damage could have cut off his femoral artery and he could have bled out quickly. But to have sand in her stomach, she could have had to breathe deeply when she made contact with a sand. In this case, there are too many things that are not consistent with the behavior of white sharks. Richard Rosenblatt, the president of the Scripps Institute of Oceanography, also disagreed with Blackbone's findings. After receiving the measurements of Michelle's injuries, Rosenblatt stated the following: "None of the marks on Michelle's body have been caused by a white shark. If she had been bitten by one, it is likely that they would have also found a huge broken white tooth on her body. Also, if a shark had ripped off her leg, she could only have been captured by a white shark." While no teeth of this caliber were found on the woman's body, there were multiple bite marks left by blue sharks, and it was known that they definitely fed on Michelle's body. Subsequently, a local pathologist discovered that there was no evidence to suggest that the bites occurred before death. Therefore, after weeks of discussions and studies, authorities on the subject of sharks refused to include von Emster on the list of animal fatalities. The state of von Emster's official death went from being a statistic to a kind of morbid limbo in which any kind of speculation was valid. But if she was not attacked to death by a shark, how the hell had she died? Due to contradictory evidence against the initial findings, the case of Michelle von Emster received a new examination in 2008. This time, the coroner, Glenn Wagner, concluded that the sharks had taken Michelle's body after her death. Therefore, history took a radical turn. If an expert declared that only a white shark could have taken Michelle's leg, and several experts had agreed that it was not a shark attack, could not it be in some way more incredible that it is not a shark attack? Since then, several theories have been opened about what might have happened that night. It is possible that Michelle went swimming at midnight, was caught in a tide, her body hit violently against the rocks, and suffered various injuries. He later went past the blue sharks after his lifeless body was submerged in the ocean. However, this theory limps for several reasons. The temperature of the water at that time was very cold, too much to think about going for a swim, and then at midnight. Not only that, the night air accentuated even more thermal sensation, so that someone went to the water a while. Another theory tells the possible fall of the girl by a cliff in the area. Von Emster would have died as a result of an unfortunate fall from the Sunset Cliffs. The area is known for having some deteriorated sandstone, and in addition, there have been deaths previously of victims that fell from the cliffs. If so, the injuries were result of a fall, a push, or even a vehicle that could have forced her to jump. While this theory may seem plausible at first, a second reading also offers too many holes. Yes, she could have suffered neck fractures and bruises due to a fall, but it is not very likely that the missing leg was the result of any fall from the cliff. Thus, we come to the theory of murder, the most widespread as the years went by. Someone attacked the woman and left her to die in the Pacific or drowned her. One of the experts mentioned that the girls would have had the shallow a lot to ingest so much sand. This could have happened to the coast when someone drowned her, for example. The truth is that the theory of the murder seems the most likely scenario. It was known that Michelle lived in a dangerous neighborhood with a lot of crime. So anything could have happened to her before her body was thrown to the cliffs. Also, there is no rational explanation for why the body was naked. So how could the shark victim of a cliff fall, or victim of an accidental drowning get naked? It does not seem to make much sense. By the way, Michelle's bag was found in the sand, in a busy area about 3 kilometers from her body. The bag contained keys and money, and it would be unlikely that anyone would see the bag in 24 hours. Someone could have killed her and then planted it there to look like an accident. One of the unofficial suspects was an acquaintance, Edwin Decker. Decker originally told the police that Michelle liked to swim naked, which could be true, or she might be trying to cover her traces of why her body was found naked. However, Decker was one of the people who asked that Michelle's case be re-examined. Be that as it may, regardless of the setting, Michelle von Emster died horribly, and her explanation seems to have no sign of being solved. It seems clear that a predator attacked her, although the trickiest thing is to know the species of the same.
Number 3.
Anna was last seen playing in the backyard of her family's home in Purisima Creek Road in rural San Mateo County, California on January 16, 1973. She had arrived home from her kindergarten class at Alvin Hatch Elementary School at 1 p.m., changed her clothes, and went outside to play. Her mother and stepfather were both inside the house. At 2:20 p.m., Anna's mother noticed she was no longer in the yard. The police were informed at 3 p.m. after her mother's search proved to be in vain. The authorities sounded a siren in the neighborhood with the hopes of attracting Anna by the noise, but she has never been heard from again. A creek ran through a Waters family's property and was in the flooding stage in January 1973. However, an intensive search of creek turned up no sign of Anna. Purisima Creek Road is not a major thoroughfare, and few cars travel on it. A friend of the Waters family reported he saw 2 men, one of them much younger than the other, in the white panel truck on the road just minutes before Anna vanished. But the men have never been identified, and it is unclear whether they were involved in her disappearance. Anna's younger half-brother later remembered that about a month before Anna went missing, a man and a woman tried to lure her into their vehicle on the road near her home, in the presence of both of Anna's half-brothers. He described the car as a 1960s model Chevrolet Impala with Washington license plates. The woman had long dark hair and wore a loose-fitting white shirt with embroidery. Anna's brother could not describe the man. Anna refused to get into the vehicle and the couple drove away. The couple and the car have never been identified, and it has not been proven that they were involved in Anna's disappearance. There is a speculation that Anna's biological father, George Harry Waters, was involved in her disappearance. George, a doctor, began behaving erratically after Anna's birth and was eventually diagnosed with schizophrenia. His family refused to have him committed to a mental hospital. However, this would have caused him to lose his license to practice medicine. George had a relationship with another older man who called himself George Brody. Anna's family believes this name was an alias. They describe Brody as a manipulative man who exercised a cult of personality over Anna's father, which led to his divorce from Anna's mother. George moved into a cheap hotel in San Francisco, California with Brody after the divorce. Although, as a practicing physician from a wealthy family, he could have afforded better lodgings. He supported Brody financially and reportedly did not make any decisions without consulting him. Brody was interested in Anna, and he believed her to be the key incarnation of her woman he had lived with. He made Anna's mother legally change her daughter's name, adding the word Ivy as Anna's middle name. The word apparently has no meaning. Brody merely wanted the letters added to Anna's name, so her name would numerologically add up to his own name. George never contacted his ex-wife after Anna's disappearance to offer sympathy or ask for updates on the case. His only known reaction to his daughter's abduction was to ask his attorney if he could discontinue his child support payments. Brody died of cancer in December 1981. His death certificate showed no birth date, no known relatives, and no social security number. Police investigated George and Brody for evidence of involvement in Anna's disappearance and could find none, and neither could a private investigator. Anna's mother and stepfather believe she is still alive and may not know she is a missing child. Anna was born in San Francisco and traveled around the country with her family prior to her disappearance. Her case remains unsolved.
Number 4.
Her smile shines from an old photograph, offering a glimpse into a beautiful world of a young woman on the cusp of adulthood. The darkness lurks at the edge of the portrait. Georgette Bauerdorf was a young socialite with a grand future until 1944, when her life was cut short in the dead of the night. The most unsettling part of the story, Georgette's murder remains unsolved over 70 years later. Born to an oil tycoon in New York City in 1924, Georgette lived a life of privilege. She and her older sister attended a convent school for Long Island, where they were trained in goodness and sobriety. When the girl's mother died in 1935, the Bauerdorf siblings and their father moved to California, where Georgette was once again enrolled in a school that befit her place in society. Alumni of the Westlake School for Girls in Los Angeles included Shirley Temple and Nina Lloyd. Upon graduation in 1941, young Georgette moved to the West Hollywood to pursue an acting career. By the age of 20, she found work at Los Angeles Times in the Women's Service Bureau and at the Hollywood Canteen, a dining and dancing club that catered the young men in uniform. Georgette called El Parasha her home, a grand Spanish-style house that played host to numerous celebrities. Her evenings were filled with nights out on the town. She was courted often and enjoyed the attention of her many suitors. Exactly what happened on the night of October 11th, 1944 remains a mystery. It was a Wednesday. Georgette was at the canteen, where her role as a junior hostess meant she danced with and entertained the servicemen on layover in Los Angeles. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary that night. At the end of her shift, she climbed into her sister's Pontiac coupe and drove home. At 11 a.m. the following morning, Georgette's maid and a janitor arrived to clean her apartment. They were met with an unlocked front door. The cleaners entered and found Georgette's lifeless body face down in the bathtub. The waters were still running. She was wearing the top part of a pyjama set. Her hair floated in the water. The police surveyed the scene. They found little evidence of struggle, though the coroner later confirmed the bruises on Georgette's body suggested she put up a fight before her death. A partial unscrewed light bulb outside her front door led investigators to believe that her killer had hidden in the darkness, perhaps even entering the apartment before Georgette arrived, lying in wait to make a move. Police assembled a rough timeline of Georgette's final moments. They believe she came home late, ate a snack in her kitchen, and was then killed by someone who may or may not have been a stranger. A downstairs neighbor heard screaming at about 2:30 a.m., along with shouts of, "Stop! You're killing me!" The neighbor assumed it was a domestic dispute and returned to sleep. The janitor himself claimed that he heard the sounds of high-heeled footsteps from Georgette's apartment, and then a crash, as if something had been dropped. Yet he couldn't confirm if there had been a second person in her apartment. Whatever occurred, Georgette's last moments were certainly desperate attempts to save her own life. In the days following the murder, police received a letter from a Sergeant Jordan Atlan. Atlan claimed that a woman matching Georgette's description gave him a lift through Hollywood on the night of October 11th. In the letter, he described the woman as appearing quite nervous, though he would downplay this claim in later years. The killer meanwhile vanished into the night after slaying, driving off in Georgette's car. The vehicle was found some distance away, abandoned and out of gas. It was the last trace of the killer in the case that quickly went cold. Georgette Bauerdorf's body was shipped back to New York, where it was interred in a family-owned plot in a Long Island cemetery. While much has been written about the killing, little is concretely known. Some speculators associate Georgette's death with that of Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia, claiming that the same man murdered the two Hollywood hopefuls. Implicated in this theory is a tall individual with a name named Jack Anderson Wilson, who plays a part on the periphery in both stories. The murder remains a mystery to this day. 75 years from that fateful night, there's little chance that Georgette's death will ever be solved.
Number 5.
Waters lived in Deerfield, Wisconsin in 2008 and was a junior at the University of Wisconsin at Stevens Point, studying botany and ethnobotany. She took a vacation to Portland, Oregon in the summer of 2008. She was scheduled to return to Wisconsin and her university classes that fall, but decided to extend her stay because she liked the area. She went to visit friends in Eureka, California. Around that time, she became very interested in spirituality, alternative lifestyles, and environmental causes. Waters had kept in regular phone contact with her family during the vacation, but she called less often after her arrival in California. She wasn't working consistently and repeatedly asked her parents for money. Her father sent her $1,000, which she left untouched in her bank account. On the morning of November 12, Waters was found standing on the doorstep of a rural home outside of Arcata, a town near Eureka. She was confused, naked, and covered with briar scratches. The homeowner called the police, who took Waters to St. Joseph's Hospital for treatment. She appeared frightened and said someone was after her, but she couldn't say exactly what had happened to her. She tested negative for drugs and police decided not to detain her. They took her to the Red Lion Hotel in the 1900 block of the 4th Street. She made arrangements with her parents to fly home. She had lost all of her identification and was trying to get new documents so she could travel. Waters was last seen on November 14th. She went to a copy center where her mother faxed her some papers to help her obtain new identification. Employees at the copy center stated Waters appeared nervous and paranoid and tried to hide the papers. She has never been heard from again. She was reported missing on November 17th. Her backpack, money, and identification were found after her disappearance at a spiritual center at Arcata. She often left her belongings there when she went for walks in Arcata Community Forest. A private investigator hired by Waters' parents found out she was in a tea ceremony before she was found and taken to the hospital. These ceremonies are illegal in the United States. The participants take ayahuasca, a drink containing 2 drugs, hamine, which is legal in the United States, and dimethyltryptamine, DMT, which is considered a controlled substance. Ingesting ayahuasca causes vomiting, diarrhea, and hallucinations that can last up to 10 hours. It has been known to cause adverse reactions, including episodes of depression or mania, in some people who are predisposed to a mental illness. It's unclear whether the tea ceremony is related to Waters' later disappearance. It's uncharacteristic of Waters to leave without warning or to be out of touch with her family. She enjoys nature and had worked on an organic farm in Stevens Point. She also taught Pilates and yoga. Her case remains unsolved.
Number 6.
It was 6:30 a.m. on January the 21st, 1998, when Stephanie Crowe's alarm went off, signaling the start of a brand new day. But that morning there was no one there to silence it. The noise roused Stephanie's grandmother, Judith, who batted down the hall to investigate. There, sprawled on the floor and in yesterday's clothes, 12-year-old Stephanie lay dead on the floor. She had been stabbed 9 times across her body and face, including 2 fatal wounds that were more than 5 inches deep. There were several hairs in her hand and a tweak near the top of her head. Stephanie had said goodnight to her family at 9:25 the previous evening, and a later examination of her body concluded that she died no later than 12:30 a.m. Police combed through the Crowe Escondido ranch house looking for clues and found the bloody footprints on Stephanie's bed frame, door and her parents' hallway door. None of the entrances to the house had been forced open, and though investigators initially believed all the windows and doors were locked, it was later concluded that Stephanie's bedroom window and the door from her parents' room to the back garden were open. Despite extensive searches, the murder weapon has never been found. When neighbors reported seeing a bearded man with dirty blonde hair walking the streets the night of the crime, police immediately recognized him as Richard Raymond Tude. The 28-year-old transient had many brushes with the law and had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. The evening after the murder, Tude was brought in for questioning and had fingernail scrapings and photographs taken. An examination revealed numerous scrapes on his body as well as a cut on the palm of his hand. Tude's clothes were taken into evidence and he was released. The police approached him the next day, having forgotten to take his fingerprints. He was happy to oblige. Over at the police station, however, detectives were following a different line of inquiry. It's common knowledge that the most murders are committed by someone known to the victim, and with no sign of forced entry, the police turned their attention to Crowe family. Stephanie's parents, Steve and Cheryl Crowe, were high school sweethearts who had been married for 16 years. Together they shared 3 children, Stephanie, Michael, age 14, and Shannon, age 10. Cheryl's mother, Judith, was visiting from Florida at the time of the murder. As officers began to interview the family, they became instantly suspicious of Michael, as well as appearing oddly unaffected by murder. The young boy claimed he had got up at around 4:30 that morning and with a headache and went to the kitchen for some Tylenol and milk. Stephanie's room was directly in front of his, and her body was positioned in such a way that the door could not have been closed. During the interrogation, Michael was subjected to a lie detector test called the Computer Voice Stress Analyzer or CVSA, which showed a signs of deception when Michael was asked if he knew who killed Stephanie. Though the CVSA is still used today, the manufacturer themselves admit that there is no independent research to show that it works, and a number of tests have found it to be no more reliable than a flip of a coin. Following almost 10 hours worth of the interviews over the course of 2 days, where police falsely claimed to have evidence against him, Michael was instructed to write a letter of forgiveness to his sister. In it, he wrote, "I am sorry that I can't even remember what I did to you. I feel that it is almost like I am being convinced of this than really knowing it. I never meant to hurt you, and the only way I know I did it is because they told me I did." Following this supposed confession, Michael was arrested for murder and taken to juvenile hall, though he couldn't be alone for long. On January 27, 1998, 10 days of Stephanie's funeral, Susie Hauser reported a knife missing from her 15-year-old son Aaron's collection. Aaron had been one of Michael's best friends, prior to a falling out a previous year. The missing knife was soon discovered at the house of Michael's best friend, 15-year-old Joshua Treadway. Treadway admitted to stealing it from Hauser and was arrested on a charge of petty theft. He was questioned during an overnight interrogation that lasted for 11 hours. Despite preliminary tests showing no blood on the knife, police told Treadway that they believed it was the murder weapon and that they had evidence against both him and Michael. 2 weeks later, Treadway was hauled in for another 10 hours of questioning, and this time he confessed that he, Michael, and Aaron had killed Stephanie together. All 3 boys were charged with murder and sat in jail for 6 months, waiting for their trials to begin in January of 1999. However, everything changed when DNA testing on the shirt revealed 3 drops of Stephanie's blood. That shirt belonged to Richard Hughes. Perhaps embarrassed by how the case had played out, and perhaps needing more time to investigate, police didn't arrest Hughes until 2002. On May 6, 2004, he was charged with voluntary manslaughter and sentenced to 17 years in prison, and it seemed that Stephanie's killer had finally been brought to justice. However, after 2 appeals claiming that the trial judge limited cross-examination of the witness, Hughes was granted a retrial in 2013. At the new trial, Hughes' attorneys argued that none of the 90 fingerprints taken from the Crowe home had belonged to him, nor was there any DNA evidence linking to the residence. Hughes' previous conviction hinged largely on the blood found on his shirt, yet it was tested 3 months after the murder. No such evidence had been found. Concerned that the blood may have got on Hughes' shirt through contamination of the crime scene analysis, the jury returned a verdict of not guilty on December 5, 2013. Stephanie's murder left anger and bitterness in its wake. It changed the lives of 3 young boys forever. For one vulnerable man, it meant 9 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. 2 decades have now passed since that tragic winter night when Crowe family lost their daughter. But as the worst edge on Stephanie's heart-shaped headstone reminds us, so bright a light shall never truly fade away.
Number 7.
Eddie, A quiet and peaceful resort town of log cabins was the site of a horrific quadruple homicide in 1981. On the night of April 11th, 14-year-old Sheila Sharp had gone to the neighbor's house to spend a night. When she came home in the morning, she found that her mother, Sue, her brother Johnny and his friend Dana had all been tied up and stabbed to death. Her younger sister Tina was missing, yet her younger brothers Ricky and Greg and their friend Justin were unharmed in the brothers' bedroom. The police were at a loss to uncover the killer on a motive. The murder victims had been relentlessly tortured. Sue and Johnny had been struck with a hammer, and Dana had been strangled. The stabbing had been so violent that the blade of the murder weapon, a steak knife, was bent backward. Incredibly, Ricky and Greg said that they had slept through the attack. But Justin changed his story several times. In one of his accounts, he said he witnessed the murders and Tina being taken. In other statements, he claimed to have dreamed the incidents he described. In 1984, Tina's school was found 50 kilometers 30 minutes away from Keddie. Her cause of death could not be determined, but it seemed that she had died the night of the attack. Meanwhile, the search for the murderer was at a standstill. There were still no suspects, although Justin's father, Martin Smart, and his friend Bo Bauerdorf acted strangely when they were interviewed by police. Evidence ignored in the Keddie murder case. Remarkably, a tape of anonymous tip regarding Tina was found sealed in case files, untouched by Plumas County Sheriff's Department in 2013 when the case was reopened with new investigators Plumas Sheriff Greg Hagood and Special Investigator Mike Gamberg. In 2016, Gamberg located a hammer believed to be one of the murder weapons in a dried-up pond in Keddie. Further, it came to light that Marilyn Smart, Marty's wife and mother of Justin, had left her husband on the day of the murder discovery. Afterward, she provided Plumas County Sheriff's Department with a handwritten letter sent to her and signed by her estranged husband. It read, "I've paid the price of your love, and now that I've bought it with 4 people's lives, you tell me we are through. Great, what else do you want?" This letter was not treated as a confession, nor was it followed up on at the time. Even though Marilyn admitted in a 2008 documentary that she thought her husband, his friend Bob, was responsible, Sheriff Doug Thomas contradicted this and stated that Martin had successfully passed the polygraph test. It was later confirmed that Martin was close with this sheriff. In 2016, Gamberg met with a counselor at the Reno Veterans Administration. The anonymous counselor told him that in May of 1981, Martin Smart has confessed to killing Sue and Tina Sharp. "I killed the woman and her daughter, and I didn't have anything to do with the boys," he purportedly told the counselor. When the DOJ was alerted to this confession in 1981, they dismissed it as hearsay. The most widely accepted theory involves a love triangle between Martin, Marilyn, and Sue. It was believed that Martin and Sue were having an affair, and that Sue was supposedly counseling Marilyn to leave her husband, who she had said was abusive to her. When Martin discovered this, he enlisted Bo, his friend and known mob enforcer who had lived with Smart in mere 10 days before Keddie Murders, to take Sue out of the picture. This could account for Marilyn leaving her husband the day of the murder discovery. It could also explain why the smart boy and the other sharp boys in the adjoining room were spared. Additionally, it gives context to Matty's handwritten note that Marilyn gave to the Plymouth Sheriff's Department. Some investigators who picked up the case when it reopened in 2013 tied the slayings into an even larger plot. To Gamberg, it is clear that the DOJ and Thomas Run Sheriff's Department covered it up, is the way it sounds. He alleges that Bo and Martin fit into a larger drug smuggling scheme, which involved the federal government. Martin was a known drug dealer, and Bo was connected to Chicago crime syndicates with financial interest in drug distribution. This might explain why the Sacramento DOJ sent two allegedly corrupt organized crime special agents instead of agents from the homicide department. It also provides an explanation as to why the two lead suspects were seemingly given a free pass and told to leave town by Sheriff Thomas. Furthermore, it suggests an answer as to why the case was handled so sloppily remains unsolved and is seemingly not a priority to the Sacramento DOJ. What is known is that this 37-year-old crime is far from a cold case. A new evidence sheds light on what may have occurred at Cabin 28 in Keddie, California. Although both Martin Smart and Bo Bauerdorf are now deceased, new DNA evidence has pointed investigators to other suspects who may have had a hand in these murders and who are still alive. It's my belief that there were more than two people who were involved in the totality of the crime, the disposal of the evidence, and the adoption of the little girl. Hangus said, "We're convinced that there are a handful of people that fit those roles who are still alive."